Yeah, so I was in the kitchen yesterday and I remember exactly where I was standing when I had this thought, but it's hard because we've been sick for so long and this weekend I'm supposed to be traveling to go to Chile and you're supposed to be going with me to do the stage race. So then I think about my next race, which is Andalusia in Spain, and there's like been media about me going and media about me being a favorite to win the race, and I'm standing there, I haven't ridden my bike in almost 2 weeks. And I see my competition and a bunch of other people that I'm going to be racing against in nice weather, riding their bike, training, like getting good fitness. And outside it's snowing and I can't ride outside. And it's been really hard for my confidence looking at that race. And I had a moment where I wanted to give up and not even go because I know that I'm not going to have the preparation. I don't want to say I'm not going to have the fitness, but I know I'm not going to have the preparation that I want for the race. And then I thought, well, that's not me. That's not me to just say, oh, well, it's not going to be perfect, so I'm not going to go. And it's because of that external pressure of people's expectations of, oh, well, Sonia's going to this race, so now she has to do well. And I want to do well, but I had to take a step back and just accept where I'm at, accept that I'm going to give the best effort I can on a daily basis to get ready for this race once I'm healthy enough to actually start training. And this is a setback, and this is what happens when there's a setback. Like, you have doubt and you have frustration that it's not going the way that you want it to go, but you just have to show up with what you have. So I'm going to get back on my bike, I'm going to ride the trainer, I'm going to maybe do a short training camp somewhere warm, but it's hard to just show up to a race and just accept what you have and accept that the card, the hands you've been dealt as okay. But it's been hard for me lately to be on the couch watching everybody else training when I know I have a race coming up and I know that I'm not going to have the fitness. And I wanted to have the Trans Andes as training, as a stage race to go to this race in Andalusia, but I don't get to do that either because I've been sick, so it's been really hard.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you do well, but it's not easy, and I think it's normal to have those thoughts come, to have doubts, and it's just how you decide to associate with those. So if you hang on to that and you stay there, you lose all this energy thinking about why it's not going to go well. So even while you're training and trying to do your best, if you're hanging on to these thoughts, you're sort of derailing yourself and you're taking away the opportunity to do well. But one of the things that you do really well is recognizing those thoughts as normal and saying, yeah, sometimes this is just how you feel, because this is the reality. I can't, wishful think away the reality of being sick and missing training and not being ideal. But you can recognize that thought and let it go, and then approach your preparation with positive energy and not letting those thoughts drag you down. And then you put yourself in a position where amazing things can happen. And again, we talked with Catherine Pendrell about her race in the Olympics, and she had 3 separate incidences in that individual race where she either had a mechanical or she crashed, and she could have given up and nobody would have blamed her. And they said, hey, you know what, you were in a position to win, and then you crashed or whatever, and it's totally acceptable. But she just said, you know what, I'm here to do my best, and I'm truly going to be okay with that. And I just got back on my bike and rode my best. And she ended up riding into a medal and came 3rd, and it was incredible. She was incredibly happy with that. And you've even seen that with your race results. Last year, you had a big stage race coming up. You got sick for 6 weeks beforehand.
Transylvania, yeah, and it wasn't like sick like this kind of sick. I wasn't on the couch, but I had lined it up so that I was traveling every single week for sponsors or for races or for whatever. So I should have canceled those trips, but instead I just kept going and I prolonged the sickness.
And an injury, so you had a really bad knee injury which you couldn't train on, so you actually couldn't even be on your bike without causing yourself more damage. So, but you went to Transylvania and you rode really, really well. If it wasn't for, once you got to Transylvania, you had some travel issues with things not working out, then you got
secondary
injured,
burns.
Secondary burns all over your body, and then the way you'd even organized yourself for the race meant a high degree of travel back and forth every day, even after races, so you couldn't recover the way you wanted. But you went into the race with a positive attitude, and you rode really, really well. You were winning the race, and would have easily had maybe easily is not fair to say, but you would have been in a position to win. And then you had the freak accident of your bike completely breaking, which never happens. But
no, I've never ever in my 14 years of riding have ever had that happen.
Just a freak accident with the way that you crashed in a really bad way. But despite all that, you had a great result. And at the
no enduro bike on the enduro day.
Yeah, like you weren't prepared as well as you could have been. All these things, but at the end of that race, despite being in a position where you had to lead his jersey and winning, and then losing it, not being on the podium, and getting penalized when there wasn't actually supposed to be a penalty there, all of these things happened, but you still left the race with a positive attitude, a positive experience, and you actually grew as a rider and a person.
And I rode well there too, which was a surprise because I had the early season preparation, but then I didn't do anything for so long, and I only had like 2 weeks to get ready, and then I performed well. So like, yeah, remembering that was there, because I remember going into that race, I was talking with my sports psychologist, Dr. Kaim, about like, oh, I'm not prepared for this, and I don't deserve to win this race because I didn't do the work. And I'm having similar feelings about Andalusia, and it's not nearly as bad. Like, I have had great training since November, and I've only been off for 2 weeks, but it's just hard because your confidence gets shaken to the core whenever, especially because like social media, we've heard about social media being, bringing people down, and this is an instance where social media this week, in the last couple weeks, has brought me down because I'm on the couch and I'm watching everybody else get faster and I'm watching myself get slower. So that's been a really hard thing, but I think that, yeah, your point of setting yourself up for a good situation to happen instead of focusing on all the bad things and all the things that you didn't do right and focusing on the things that you are doing right. But it's still hard on race day, because if it doesn't go the way you want to start making excuses. Well, I didn't train enough and like blah, blah, blah. But it's hard not to make those excuses whenever people are looking at you saying, well, I thought Sonia was fast. I thought Sonia should be good enough to win this race, and then you're not winning the race. Or overcoming it and maybe you are winning the race, but it's so hard.
And I think the irony is kind of that even if you go to a race and your training was great and you have a decent result and you're pretty happy with that, even if you have a good result, almost invariably you look back and you go, well, I could have done these things better. Like, even when it is, quote, everything's right, it's really hard to sit back and accept that as being, you know what, I did everything I could, given the situation, whether it was perfect or not, and accepting that. So it's this kind of psychological game. Even if everything did go perfectly in your training, during the race, at the end of the race, you probably would still be looking back going, well, this would have been better if I'd done that, and this would have been better if I'd done that. So if you can leave those emotional anchors behind, the psychological anchors behind, and just focus on the positives of where you are in your training and where your likelihood of performance being good is much better. And your likelihood of actually learning from your performance is much higher too, because you're focusing on a bigger picture, not just trying to nail these negative scans. You're scanning for a negative and picking it out rather than trying to have a more holistic view.
Yeah, and I think that, even focusing on all those things, like, people say to me, like, oh, well, you're always so positive. That's impossible that you could be that positive and happy all the time. But I'm recording this because I want to show people that I do have doubt. And this is how I handle it when I have doubt. I acknowledge it. I talk about it with my supportive husband, which is awesome. Or it could be your friend or a psychologist or whomever. But, it's also hard because on race day, you're going to show up and do the best you can with what you have. But your results are relative to somebody else. And you can't control what other people are doing. You can't control a lot of those things. So you have to learn, and it's not easy to do, you have to learn how to accept those results that you get. And when I look back at some of my results that have been suboptimal because of whatever the reason, I still don't feel good about those. I'm still not happy that I didn't win a race, but then I have to say again, like, okay, well, I got 4th place at this race, and I got all my excuses or my reasons or whatever. But then you take another step back and you say, well, did I show up and do the best that I could on that day? And sometimes, you know what? Sometimes you don't do your best. Sometimes you give up, and sometimes those bad things happen too, and just finding a way to accept those.
And learn from them when there's opportunity, right? Like you said, it's not always perfect, and you're not trying to explain away an opportunity to learn. You're not trying to explain away a failure, and I use that in a positive way. You're not trying to explain away, well, things didn't go my way, and I could have done things differently. You're not trying to avoid those in any way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I actually think it's boring. Like, of course it's awesome to win every race and for everything to go well all the time, but that would get really boring, because I think as humans, we secretly like a little bit of drama. We secretly like a little bit of a challenge, because all of us, no matter what we're doing, we constantly put ourselves in challenging situations, whether we recognize it or not, we do. Like, if you look at people, certain people do it in their relationships. Like, they thrive in drama, they thrive in making their relationships harder. Fortunately, we don't. Some people do it like with conflict in their friendships or at work or whatever, or like people will, like, if people get too complacent, they get bored. So also, I think reflecting on that and saying, well, it's actually interesting whenever there's a challenge, because now your brain is engaged and you're not just on autopilot anymore, because you have to deal with these emotions one way or another.
Yeah, and I think, what's been helpful for me, and I know we've talked about this a lot, is also meditation has been helpful in terms of how you deal with thoughts that aren't productive. So how do you get to a position where you realize you're being negative, or you realize you're focusing on something that's not productive, but how do you let that go and then redirect yourself? And I think a lot of it is practice. It's not, some of it's inherently who we are. Some of it is genetically driven to being more positive or more negative, but a lot of that is learned and can be changed if you desire that. So in meditation, we've used the app Headspace, and they give you this, and I remember the little cartoon that they have. They have this little cartoon guy, and he's sitting on the side in a little hammock, and all these thoughts are going by, and they're little bubbly clouds. And so you can choose to jump in front of that and stay with that thought the whole time, or you can recognize it's there. If there's a lesson there, wonderful. If there isn't, who cares? And you can let that just bounce on by, and you can wait for the positive ones to come. And that's sort of a way of scanning. And again, there's times when those thoughts, you've run out into the middle of the traffic and you haven't realized, and you go, oh crap, what am I doing out here, right? I need to get off the side of the road and let these things go by. And it's human nature. No one ever is always positive all the time. Of course they're not. But with practice, you can get really, really good, and you are really good at recognizing when you're in a position that's not helping you, trying to remove yourself and take something positive out of that, and then refocusing. But it's certainly not easy.
Yeah, I admit I haven't been doing meditation for a while, and I'm ashamed of that, and I've been having a hard time getting myself started, which is funny. But I think that I still practice meditation every single day, because an example was when I was standing in the kitchen in that spot where I can remember exactly where I was yesterday, when I started going down the train of negativity and saying, I should just quit, I should just give up and not even show up to this thing. How could I show my face there, because I've been sick for 2 weeks, and making all these excuses. And I was able to stop that and start again and deal with it. So yeah, but I think I do need to start doing more meditation again on a daily basis.
It's interesting that we're talking about sports and performance in sports, but how that really can impact your performance in your life. And we're not talking about hitting a goal at work or anything like that, but just how to live a more present and fulfilled life. And sports is a really interesting way to give you these little practices, and things that matter less, let's say, is an outcome of a race versus an outcome of a relationship, or maybe even an outcome at work. For most of us that aren't full-time professional athletes, it's more important for me to have a healthy career than it is to do well in races. But it's really interesting as you start thinking about how to perform in races, and how, in the lessons that sport teach you, how to transition that into your life. And this is one of those examples of a really meaningful, obvious way sport is really helpful in all kinds of ways in your life. So it's kind of fun. And I think also, this is a bit of an aside, but we look at the way, we talked about this a little bit, about how the world of media has changed, and the world of TV particularly has changed. It used to be you had so many channels and you watch them, and that's all gone, and you can, there's Netflix and all kinds of ways to consume media. But the one thing that hasn't changed on TV since probably the 70s, if not before, is sports.
And the Weather Channel.
People love weather. But
yeah.
Really, sports is still just as fascinating, and it really has, the delivery of it hasn't changed, the format of it hasn't changed. I can't think of anything else on media.
Just the height of people's shorts changed, like exactly. Basketball shorts.
Exactly. Thank God they are dropping. But yeah, so it's really interesting, again, because I think, like, to get back to your earlier comment, we connect over these things in a really meaningful way. Sports is a really interesting way to learn things.
Yeah, and I think about where the root of my anxiety, where the root of the anxiety came from when I started feeling this way yesterday. And it was from social media. Like, it was from watching everybody else outside riding when I know I'm not going to be able to ride outside for over a month. Watching everybody else train and get faster while I can't, while I'm on the couch. And when I was on the couch last year for a month when I had foot surgery, it didn't bother me because I didn't have any close races coming up. But I can see...
That was planned for as well.
And that was planned for, yeah. I can actually see how people can feel anxiety about social media, that they're not good enough or they're not doing enough. And typically I don't have those feelings. But this was a time where I actually did feel I'm not good enough, and I'm not going to be good enough because I see what everybody else is doing and it looks great. And then I try to remind myself, well, even when I'm training all the time, I still don't feel amazing on my bike all the time, and everything still isn't perfect. So reminding yourself that that is the highlight reel, and you're projecting what you wish you could be doing onto that person or thing or whatever, and that's not actually reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, and one more thing I want to talk about with self-doubt is something that I've found helpful, and because I was on the couch for a couple of weeks, I've read a ton of books because I love reading nonfiction books. And something that I've done and that I read about again was journaling. And when you're having doubt, write down the worst case scenario of what could happen, and then write down the best case scenario of what could happen. And then write down all the things that go along with that, like how are you going to feel? How are other people going to perceive you? What's going to happen? How is this going to change your life on a large scale? So if you've tried everything and nothing's helping, I think doing that really helps put things in perspective in the big picture, because we can get so myopically focused on something, and it becomes this big deal, and it just takes over our lives, when really, when you look at it from a big picture perspective, it's really just a blip on the screen, and it helps you detach some of the crazy importance that you've put on it.